in Stoic Men Tribe. Today we're tapping into a powerful truth, a moment of inner strength, sharp clarity and timeless wisdom. Don't skip any part of this video, share your thoughts in the comment. Please do us a favor by hitting the subscribe button, like and turn on notifications, so you never miss an update. Let's break it down. Once you know this secret, keep your mouth shut. There comes a time in every person's life, not marked by celebrations or ceremonies, when something inside quietly, irrevocably shifts. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It doesn't arrive with applause or clarity. It tiptoes in, often disguised as disappointment, as silence, as the ache of things not going the way you planned. Sometimes it's heartbreak that cracks you open. Sometimes it's betrayal that shakes you awake. Other times it's not one defining event, but a slow, relentless accumulation of moments. Conversations that felt hollow, friendships that faded, efforts that were never appreciated. Little by little, your illusions dissolve, and the noise around you begins to quiet. And in that quiet, something ancient stirs, a knowing, a deeper kind of understanding that doesn't come from books or lectures, something you couldn't have received any earlier, no matter how badly you wanted it. This kind of wisdom isn't taught, it's earned. It's earned in silence, in solitude, in the long nights where you question who you are and what you're becoming. It's earned through the tears you didn't post, the storms you didn't broadcast, the pain you carried with grace when no one was watching. And then one day, without fanfare, you just see it. You see people differently. You see situations for what they are, not what you hoped they'd be. You recognize manipulation not as mystery but as insecurity dressed in charm. You notice when people don't really listen, only wait for their turn to talk. You stop being impressed by volume and start being drawn to presence. You stop needing attention and begin to crave alignment. And the truth hits you. The more you grow, the quieter you become. Because you finally understand that most of the world isn't listening to understand. They're listening to react, to judge, to compare, to argue. And you've outgrown the need to be understood by those who have no interest in truly seeing you. You no longer feel the need to justify yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You don't waste breath explaining your vision to people whose minds are trapped in limitation. You no longer pour your energy into proving yourself in spaces that were never meant to hold your truth. Instead, you protect it. You protect your inner world like sacred ground. You guard your peace like treasure. You understand that not every insight is meant to be spoken. Not every lesson is meant to be shared. Some truths are too deep for words. They must be lived. And this is the secret, the one they never teach you. Real growth is quiet. Real power is still. Real understanding. Because here's the truth most won't tell you. Real wisdom doesn't perform. It doesn't chase attention. It doesn't need a stage, a spotlight, or a crowd clapping in agreement. It doesn't flash itself like a trophy or beg to be seen. No, real wisdom is quiet. It's still. It's subtle in the way the ocean is deep. You don't see all of it, but you feel its weight. It doesn't need validation because it already knows its value. It doesn't seek applause because it understands that the loudest reactions often come from the shallowest understanding. Real wisdom doesn't interrupt. It observes. It doesn't argue to win. It listens to learn. It doesn't shout over chaos. It becomes the calm beneath it. You see, people often mistake noise for knowledge. They mistake arrogance for authority. They think the one who speaks the most knows the most. But wisdom, real wisdom, doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. It just needs to be true. And truth, real truth, rarely comforts. Because most people don't actually want truth. They want something that feels nice. Something that reassures them that their worldview is correct, that their beliefs don't need to be challenged, that their decisions were wise even if they were made from fear. They don't want mirrors, they want masks. They don't want to wake up, they want to dream longer. And that's where the tension begins. When you start to see clearly, when life, pain, and growth begin stripping away your illusions, you begin to feel the weight of what most people aren't ready to carry. And you'll be tempted to share what you've learned. You'll want to scream from the rooftops, "This isn't real. This isn't love. This isn't success. This isn't peace." But if you do, you'll learn something quickly. People don't attack what you say. They attack what they're not ready to face. They'll call your truth negativity. They'll call your clarity arrogance. They'll call your awareness judgment. Not because you're wrong, but because you're disrupting their comfort. And comfort is sacred to the unawakened mind. That's when the real wisdom begins. That's when you stop trying to explain yourself to people who can't even hear themselves. That's when you stop handing your insight to those who see it as a threat, not a gift. That's when you realize that truth without timing is trauma, and trying to elevate someone who doesn't want to rise isn't compassion. It's futility. It's not your job to awaken the world. Your job is to walk in your light, to embody what you know, to live your truth so fully that it speaks louder than your words ever could. That's when something within you finally shifts, quietly but permanently. Not because you read the right book or heard the right quote, not because someone handed you permission to evolve, but because life, in its own relentless, often brutal way, carved wisdom into your bones. And now you carry it, not like a flag to wave, but like a torch to protect. That's when the real understanding begins. That's when you stop wasting oxygen trying to explain yourself to people who aren't even listening to their own hearts. People whose ears are closed by ego, whose minds are armored by insecurity, whose souls aren't open to receive anything beyond the validation they're desperate to extract. You learn, painfully and with great cost, that some people aren't rejecting you. They're rejecting the part of themselves your truth threatens to expose. That's when you stop offering insight like charity to those who treat your clarity like an attack. You stop laying down your light in rooms where it only casts shadows of other people's shame. You stop mistaking effort for impact and realize that not everyone is ready to rise. And here's the hard-earned truth. Truth without timing becomes trauma. It doesn't matter how wise, how pure, how transformative your words are. If the soil isn't ready, the seed dies. If the heart isn't open, the truth wounds instead of heals. And if the ego feels threatened, even wisdom feels like war. You begin to understand that trying to elevate someone who refuses to rise isn't noble. It's not patience. It's not love. It's futility. And in some cases, it's self-betrayal in disguise. Giving parts of yourself to those who haven't earned your presence, let alone your perspective. Because it was never your job to awaken the world. That burden was never yours to carry, no matter how empathic, gifted, or perceptive you are. You are not the savior of anyone's soul but your own. Your role is simpler, but far more powerful. To walk in your light, to embody your truth so deeply that your existence becomes the lesson, not your words. To be so grounded in who you are that you no longer need to convince anyone of anything. You become the mirror, not the mouthpiece, the example, not the preacher. You begin to live in alignment, and alignment doesn't beg to be understood. It simply radiates. It pulls the right people in and filters the wrong ones out, effortlessly. And in this new state of being, you discover something sacred. There is peace in restraint. There is power in silence. There is dignity in knowing that not every insight needs to be spoken. Not every battle deserves your sword, and not every invitation requires your presence. You stop sharing your inner treasures with people who only know how to steal. You stop opening your soul in rooms where curiosity is replaced by judgment. You stop confusing vulnerability with wisdom. Because sharing your deepest truths with people who aren't safe is not enlightenment, it's emotional exposure. It's setting fire to your own sanctuary for the illusion of connection. You learn to hold your clarity close, not as a secret, but as something sacred. You learn that wisdom isn't about speaking, it's about knowing when not to. And silence. Silence becomes your superpower, because when you're truly grounded in truth, you don't need to prove it. When you're truly at peace, you don't need to protect it with words. And when you truly know who you are, the need to explain evaporates. You become a living contradiction to the chaos around you. A calm force in a loud world. A soul who no longer needs to be seen to know they matter. Because your truth, it doesn't need defense. It just needs embodiment. And your light, it doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs consistency. So let others talk. Let them assume. Let them misunderstand the quiet you've worked so hard to earn. You'll be too busy becoming to explain, too invested in your peace to perform, too anchored in your purpose to engage in noise. This is the secret few will understand. But once you know it, once you feel it in your bones, you'll never go back. Not because you're hiding, but because you're finally home. And eventually, after enough seasons of inner warfare and silent rebuilding, you arrive at a knowing, not a loud epiphany, not a declaration made to the world, but a quiet, grounded recognition that settles into your bones like ancient truth. Silence is not absence, it's awareness. Discretion is not timidity, it's discernment. Restraint is not lack, it's abundance contained by wisdom. Because when you've walked through fire, when you've rebuilt yourself from the ruins of heartbreak, confusion, betrayal, and breakdowns no one saw, you begin to understand. You're not here to be a lighthouse for everyone. You're not meant to throw rope to people who would rather drown in their denial. You're not obligated to explain the depth of your becoming to people still wading in shallow waters. You are not the translator of your truth for ears that are not ready to hear. So you stop chasing clarity for others. You stop bleeding insight in rooms that reward noise, not nuance. You stop bending yourself backwards just to be digestible to people who only consume what doesn't challenge them. And you let go, fully. You let them talk. Let them assume. Let them misinterpret your silence as passivity. Let them gossip about a version of you they never truly knew. Let them judge from their level of awareness, while you operate from yours. Because you're busy doing something they may never witness. You're evolving, you're ascending. You're deepening in ways that no social media post, no motivational speech, no surface level conversation could ever articulate. You've reached that sacred turning point where your growth is, you begin to protect your peace not as a preference, but as a sacred duty. Because once you've survived the storm, not just any storm, but your storm, the inner one, the kind that rips through your spirit, the kind that doesn't leave visible debris, but alters everything inside of you. You no longer treat peace as a luxury. You don't romanticize chaos anymore. You don't chase noise. You don't crave conflict. You've buried too many versions of yourself to ever let someone drag you back into who you used to be. Peace for you isn't just a mood. It's not an aesthetic. It's not a quote on your wall. It's your holy ground. It's the temple you built with trembling hands after life broke you open. It's the space you carved out in silence, when no one clapped for your growth, when no one saw the internal wars you were fighting, when all you had was pain, and the decision to heal anyway. And so when people ask why you're so quiet now, why you don't react like you used to, why you're distant, calm, unreadable, they don't realize you're not distant, you're just disciplined. You're not unreadable. You're just uninterested in being decoded by those who never took the time to understand you in the first place. Because once the veil lifts, once the illusion shatters, once life teaches you the hard truths no one can prepare you for, you don't just see the world differently, you feel it differently. You feel the weight behind conversations. You hear the unspoken pain behind people's words. You see the mask behind the smiles. You begin to recognize that most of what people say isn't actually about you at all. It's about what they haven't healed, what they haven't faced, what they're still running from. And that's the beginning of a new kind of awareness. One that doesn't come from books or podcasts or theory. One that is born only through lived pain, earned strength, and real inner work. You remember all the times you tried to explain yourself, not to share, but to be validated, not to connect, but to be rescued. You remember all the energy you poured into people who didn't want understanding. They wanted obedience. People who didn't want truth. They wanted confirmation. And now, with this clarity, you understand why it never worked. Because you were trying to plant seeds in soil that was never ready to receive them. You were speaking truth to people whose entire identity depended on maintaining the lie. You were offering insight to minds still protecting their wounds like trophies. You were speaking into rooms that didn't have the silence required to listen. And here's what the secret teaches you, the real one. Most people are not speaking from wisdom. You realize that most arguments aren't rooted in logic. They're fueled by fear, insecurity, ego. They're not conversation. They're collisions. Two unhealed stories trying to overpower each other, not to learn, but to win. And there's no wisdom in that. Only exhaustion, only chaos, only more noise masquerading as meaning. You see that most of what passes as attention in this world, it's just static. It's just a loud attempt to drown out inner silence. People talk, not to connect, but to escape themselves, to fill the void, to prove they matter by making sound, but volume isn't value. And not everything that's loud is alive. And then there's the illusion of connection. Oh, how much of it is just performance. People mirroring what they think others want to see. Sharing just enough to seem vulnerable, but never enough to be real. Smiling while silently aching. Agreeing while internally screaming. Saying I'm fine because the world rewards appearance over authenticity. So what do you do with all that knowing? You go inward, not to escape, but to remember. Not to isolate, but to recalibrate. You grow quieter, not out of fear, but out of power. Because when you finally come home to yourself, you no longer seek shelter in noise. You begin to see silence as a strength, not a sentence. You begin to honor stillness as sacred, not strange. You begin to understand that peace isn't passive. It's a fierce decision to protect your energy in a world constantly trying to steal it. You speak less, not because you have less to say, but because you finally learned that not everyone deserves to hear you. You've learned that your words are sacred, and not all soil is fertile enough for the seeds of your soul. So you give your voice to those who honor it, and your silence to those who never will. You give less of your mind away, not because you're closed, but because you've become whole. And wholeness doesn't need to be broadcasted. It doesn't beg to be believed. It simply is, quiet, complete, at peace. You begin to realize that clarity isn't loud. It doesn't demand a stage. It doesn't compete. It walks into a room and shifts the energy without a word. And that's who you're becoming. Not the loudest voice in the room, but the calmest presence. Not the one who explains everything, but the one who no longer needs to. Not the one who wins debates, but the one who no longer enters them. Because the secret taught you this. Not everyone is meant to meet you at your depth, and that's okay. Your job is not to pull them down or wait for them to rise. Your job is simply to keep becoming, and trust that the ones meant for your frequency will find you in the silence. So you live, not louder but truer, not emptier but quieter, not harder but wiser, and you carry your peace like armor, because now you know it's not your job to convince the world, it's your job to become. And what about the secret? Not the surface level truth, not the kind people post for likes and applause, not the catchy quote that sounds wise but leaves no imprint. No, I'm talking about the real secret, the one you don't read in books, the one you can't borrow, the one that only reveals itself after you've been broken open and are rebuilt in silence. Here it is. Your greatest power isn't in how loud you speak, it's in how deeply you live. It's in your presence, not your performance. It's in the quiet way you enter a room and bring calm without a word. It's in the stillness behind your eyes that says, I've seen storms and survived. It's in the way you no longer rush to defend yourself, because you've made peace with being misunderstood. Because clarity lives in calm, and calm is not weakness. It's the result of a soul that stopped fighting battles that don't matter. It's the evolution of someone who has nothing left to prove. Because when you know who you are, you stop needing anyone else to validate it. You stop giving your energy to misunderstanding. You stop feeding arguments that only feed your ego. You stop chasing approval like it's oxygen. Because you've learned. The people meant to see you will, and the ones who don't were never your audience to begin with. You stop broadcasting your transformation. Because real growth doesn't need a megaphone. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't beg to be believed. It just keeps moving. Quietly, steadily, like a river shaping mountains over time. You keep building, even when no one's watching. Especially when no one's watching. Because you've realized that the most sacred parts of your evolution were never meant for public consumption. They were meant for you, and the future you're stepping into. You keep growing, not in the spotlight, but in the soil, in the places where roots take hold, where no one claps, where no one praises, but where life actually begins. You keep transforming. Not because it looks good, but because staying the same would dishonor your soul. And you do it all quietly, without the need to announce every move, without the desire to be seen in every moment, because you've tasted something far more satisfying than recognition. Self-respect, peace, alignment. So let them talk. Let them assume. Let them miss the miracle you're becoming. That's not your concern anymore. You've outgrown the need to be explained. Let your life speak, not in noise, but in evidence. Let your actions be the sermon, and your peace be the punctuation. Let your silence become the space where your future takes shape. Because here's the truth no one tells you. Once you know the secret, once you feel the power of restraint, the liberation of self-containment, the richness of an undisturbed mind, you don't want to explain yourself anymore. You don't need to. You don't need to argue. You don't need to prove. You don't need to drag anyone along with you, because your worth isn't up for debate. Your path doesn't require approval, and your soul doesn't owe the world an explanation. Once you know the secret, you'll stop wasting breath on those who can't hear you through their own noise. You'll stop throwing energy into empty conversations. You'll stop bleeding value into hands that only fumble it. You'll rise, silently, deliberately, beautifully. And your silence, it won't mean surrender. It will mean sovereignty. Because now you understand. Real power doesn't perform. It simply is. If this resonates with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update.